The odds are seemingly stacked against all of us, and that's what today's show is about. Today's show is about making sure that you feel that you have the ability to move forward and be successful. Now, this is part of my series on dealing with the mental and emotional strains of a pandemic, but it's also something that links into business as much as everything else. Because wherever you are and whatever you do, I know that the biggest thing facing you is how do you survive in a world that keeps changing? How do you get out there in a world that seems to want to bite you? And also, the big boys have more finances, they have more ability to be able to put things out there and face things better than I can. So how do I get past that? Today's show is all about that. I'm going to start the whole ball rolling by sharing with you this image of what today's show is about. How to punch above your weight and win. And this shows a classic example of David and Goliath, which you'll know, or you may not know of, but you probably will know from reading it in Bible studies, or if you've got a comparative religion where you've got the two characters in it, you know about the Philistines and the Israelites who came into a big battle. I will share with you more about that, and I'll also tell you why despite everything, there was no chance that Goliath was going to win. He stood no chance against David. I'll tell you exactly why in a moment. So with that, you should be going, this is interesting, because the whole point is then when we analyze what David did versus what Goliath did, you can start looking at your position in lots of different things, in your business, in your relationships, in your location, in your evolution, in your career, and think, well, actually, I've got a lot more advantages than I thought. I didn't think it was quite so easy before, but maybe it is. Does that interest you? Should do financially, should do really well for you. So let's look at that.
So be it, Lord.
So there we are. I'm going to get very controversial for you now. You saw that scene as we talked about it before. That's David versus Goliath. Now I'm going to use something I learned from a wonderful book called David versus Goliath, yeah, obviously, by Malcolm Gladwell, one of my favorite authors. And I would urge you to read all his stuff. He's got some incredible insights. Now that is a mainstay of many religious stories about how the little guy, when he's guided by a higher power, can go on to be a big guy because he is just. Now, I grew up with that story, and I was never able to work out exactly how it all worked until I read Malcolm Gladwell's take on it, and this is fascinating. So let's set the scene so you can understand exactly what we're talking about. So we're talking about basically David versus Goliath. David represents the Israelites, and Goliath, the huge monster type sized guy there, represents the Philistines. Now, in those days, what used to happen in many occasions is when an army lined up against another army, sometimes we'd just choose a champion rather than let all the guys die and it's some crazy bloodbath, and then you'd have nobody left to carry on defending the lands. So we'd say, right, let's choose a champion from either side, one versus the other. Whoever wins, wins the battle, end of. Bit like playing a game of chess, I guess. So you've got the Israelites and you've got the Philistines on either side of the valley and a trough in between. Now they're sent in Goliath, who's, as you can see, is basically a big bruiser. And Goliath was huge, 6'9" apparently, and nobody wanted to fight him. Who would want to fight him? He goes out and basically, the infantry in those days, especially if you've got something like Goliath, it was like taking on a tank. Would you like to fight a tank? Oh, let me think about it. Probably no, is the answer. So nobody wanted to fight him. So he's there with his spear, and he's wearing bronze armor, and he had his sword and shield and everything. So then David, who's a shepherd apparently, comes along and says, I'll take him on, picks up 5 smooth stones, and goes out to fight him. Now, what we didn't mention before is that when you get somebody as huge as Goliath was meant to be, they say 6'9", it might have been whatever size, they say that he was walked into battle by his page. Now, why would that be significant? Well, possibly because he was freakily big. And if he's freakily big, there's a very good chance that he had tumours and all sorts of issues with his eyesight. He couldn't see properly exactly where he was going. So why does this matter? Why does that have any relevance to it? Because if he's walked to the battle scene and stood facing the right direction, then he needs to have an enemy that comes close to him to be able to see who he's fighting against. Otherwise, he's going to see 2 of everything. And you can't do that kind of battle. Plus also the nature of who he is, he needs a close hand battle where he can swing his big sword and pokey with his spear and smack him with his shield. That's a battle he's used to be doing. Now, that's not the battle that was ensuing. If you think about it, you've got a guy as a shepherd who's going out there. Now, the shepherd's got a different job. Everyone's thinking, well, he looks after sheep, but no, think about it. Who's he fighting to protect sheep? Wolves. Really nasty wild animals. So therefore, he had to be really, really good with a slingshot. That's the equivalent of being a marksman or a sniper. A slingshot, as you saw there, was a piece of leather with some rope on either side. You load it, and you swing it round, and then you release it. And you release it with a snap, and it goes like the crack of a whip. The reason it goes like that is with the speed of sound, you're releasing a bullet. It's like having a Magnum 44 or 45 ready to point at somebody's head and shoot. And you can do it from a distance. So he's never going to get close enough for Goliath to see him properly, or for Goliath to be able to reach him with any of the armaments and weapons that he had. Let's discuss this with a little bit more depth. I want to show you exactly how this pans out. So let's get the 2 battles again. We have here the kinds of warriors that you had in those days. We had the cavalry, you had the infantry, and had a projectile warrior or artillery. So the cavalry are men on horseback. Goliath was clearly infantry with his big sword and shield and walking forward. And then David was a projectile warrior. Now, if you look at what that actually means in the real world, that means quite significant stuff. That means that you're always going to have a battle between the different factions, and you're always going to have a challenge where we can't work out who it is that's going to win, unless you put somebody up against something that they're always going to beat. So let's look at this again. The cavalry would always win against the projectile warriors or artillery. The infantry would always beat the horses. And the projectile warriors could pick off the soldiers from a distance. So let's look at that now. There was no way that David was ever going to lose. He got his stone, he kept his distance, he looked for that gap and smacked him straight in the head. knocked him down. The next thing in the Bible, because I grew up as a Christian, is he goes over, gets Goliath's sword, cuts his head off, just to prove he's dead, with his own sword, which of course made the Philistines run away, which you would do. And then he goes after all of Goliath's family and slaughters them as well. Right, okay, not a bad loser, but not a bad winner. Just don't have an argument with Goliath. So clearly with David, David was some kind of challenging winner, shall we say. But that's beside the point. The point is that the way you go into battle and choosing your battles and who you're up against is always a weakness that most people can't perceive. And being big does not mean that being small means you're going to lose. That's what today's show is all about. And to emphasize that point a little bit more, next up, I want to share with you a fascinating video all about Napoleon. Now, Napoleon, the very famous French general who had a huge empire and loved Josephine and basically died on his own sad years later. But he was an incredible tactician. And with a much smaller army, he conquered so much of Europe as a direct result of just being strategically better. So how could he do that with a smaller army, especially when you're facing off on one side versus the other, which typically was how they used to do it in those days. So I'm going to show you now an incredible video, and when you see it, you get a little bit closer to realizing, and this is what I want you to get from today's show. I want you to understand that at every stage, you're going up against it. You're up against coronavirus. You're up against people who have more money than you. You're up against companies that could freeze you out. You're up against the fact that you've got no job, but you need to get a job, and other people are fighting for the same jobs. You're up against the fact you've got rent to pay. You've got a ton of different things that are a challenge to you, but only if you fight the battle that you were looking at before. There's a ton of different ways of doing it. Now, this goes out live to YouTube, goes out live to LinkedIn, we go out live to Facebook, out to Twitter, and out to Periscope. I love your thoughts, I love your comments. Stick with me. Let me know your thoughts wherever you are around the world, and let me know about your particular battle that you're facing, the real challenge you're up against, and we'll see if we can slip this into the stuff we're talking about today. So next up, let's look at Napoleon and how he managed to overcome the odds against him. That's up next on Speak on Stage.
I remember years ago being intrigued by Napoleon's lightning campaign across Italy in 1796. His small, ragged army of less than 38,000 men began the campaign against 60,000 Piedmontese and Austrians. And yet, Napoleon had victory after victory, and once I researched more thoroughly, I was puzzled by the numbers. For example, at the Battle of Mondovi, he outnumbered the Piedmontese. And at the Battle of Castiglione, he also had more men on the field than the Austrians. How was he able to pull this off? I thought he was the one outnumbered. And that's when I was introduced to the military principle of concentration of force and defeat in detail. Author Edward J. Erickson writes, "Defeat in detail is a doctrinal military term that means to defeat an enemy by destroying small portions of its armies instead of engaging its entire strength. Practically speaking, this happens when the mass or weight of one army is brought to bear against smaller portions of an opposing army, thereby achieving decisive superiority. This is most often seen when an army divides itself into smaller groups, which can easily be separated and defeated in isolation." So it pretty much works like this. Let's say this is your objective, and you only have 12,000 men, while the enemy has 20,000. This is what Napoleon would do. He would advance and spread out his forces. Consequently, the enemy disperses their forces as well and garrisons each town. Now, remember, you must always have superior numbers when you are the attacking force. Only then can you be sure of victory. So, if you were to order a mass attack all along the front, it would be 3,000 versus 5,000, not good odds. However, Napoleon would do something clever. On the eve of battle, he would concentrate his forces, perhaps leaving only small detachments to cover the front. And then he would choose to attack only one point, preferably the weakest, and crush them there. Thus, at the actual point of contact with the enemy, it is you who outnumbers them. This is the concentration of force. And because the enemy units were so spread out and far apart from each other, they put themselves in a position to be defeated in detail. It's brilliant, yet simple. You end up engaging only a portion of the enemy instead of its whole army. And it's important to note that a crucial factor for this to occur successfully is having capable forces who can maneuver quickly before the opposing side catches on to what you are doing. So speed helps you achieve surprise, thus ensuring victory. Napoleon would use this strategy during his campaigns. He constantly defeated superior armies separately before they were able to combine against him. Other historical examples include The Battle of Tannenberg. In the beginning phase of World War I, a German army was able to defeat two Russian armies separately. In the Balkan Wars, the Ottoman army was defeated because it was divided into several groups. Their enemies therefore were able to achieve numerical superiority on the battlefield. Rommel, in the North African campaign, would always mass his tanks when fighting the British. He once remarked to a captured British officer, "What difference does it make if you have 2 tanks to my 1 when you spread them out and let me smash them in detail?" And General Stonewall Jackson in 1862 was able to fight off 3 Union armies totaling 52,000 men with only an army of 17,000. And if you want to see how he did that, you can click here for that video.
Isn't that fascinating? Don't you think the fact that you've got a strategist, a general who basically works out that you can take on everybody by tricking them into splitting up and then going head to head with them with your big army? So you've got to think about a couple of factors that you have that are agile, especially if you're a really small organization, like with one person in your organization. You can pivot and you can change any single day. You can do proposals, you can have meetings, you can do all these different things. You haven't got a massive infrastructure, but you slowly got to turn around and take on a new client. You can also turn around and be really agile by having virtual teams. So your teams are around the world, they work with you as a freelancer, they basically get an instruction from you and how much you're going to pay them, and they get stuck in, excuse me, that's my cup of tea coming back, you get stuck into doing the job. That means that any client has got a number of different objectives or desires or solutions that they need you to fix. You can get straight in there and say, yeah, no problem, we can do that. When do you need it by? And then just get the resources. If a client pays you in advance, that's much easier because then you can pay the other guys in advance, which incentivizes them to get stuck into doing it faster for you. So being a small organization doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to lose against a big organization. And coming up in this show, we're going to be examining 2 incredible insights. One by Muhammad Ali, the second one by Gary Vee, as to why being a small business and taking on the big guys has its own massive advantages. Now, I hope this is useful for you. I'd love you to share your thoughts and ideas with me on it because I've found this to be a really interesting angle. Whoever you are, that the underdog can always triumph against the big guys. If you've ever studied Art of War by Sun Tzu, then you'll see there's a number of different things like striking first and looking at the enemy's terrain, all the rest of it. We'll be going through a ton of that in today's show as well, when we go into the cheat sheets. But before we do that, let's just understand how that fits together with someone like Muhammad Ali. Now, Muhammad Ali, or Cassius Clay as he was born, is perceived to be, he's no longer with us, but is perceived to be the greatest boxer of all time. The thing about Muhammad Ali is he just was one of the smartest, funniest, but fastest and strongest and most fit fighters of all time. When he used to go to the gym and work out, he would only start counting his repetitions after he started feeling tired. He'd get himself to that point and then he'd start counting how many times he went on. This is just part of the amazing story of Muhammad Ali. Now, this particular scene I'm going to show you in a few moments' time is called The Rumble in the Bronx. And it takes us back to the 70s, where Muhammad Ali, who was a big champion at the time, was going up against the guy who could beat him. This guy was called George Foreman, who you may know since then has become a very cuddly guy, cuddly businessman who sells grilling equipment to make sandwiches and cook meats and stuff like that. But in those days, he was 100% badass. So he's going up against Muhammad Ali. He's bigger, he's stronger, not necessarily faster, but the endurance that he goes and the hits that he makes have just wiped out everybody. So Muhammad Ali comes up with a strategy. This strategy is called the rope-a-dope. It wasn't called that at the time, but it was an incredible feat that he managed to pull off. Let me explain what you're just about to see. And I want to tell you in advance what you're about to see so you can understand how he executed it and how he managed to get the right results long before he got into the ring. So the rope-a-dope is he knows he's taking on a bigger opponent. He knows his own body strength is physically good, but going up in an endurance race, going up in a just straight punch-for-punch battle, the odds are he's going to lose. So what he decided to do was, rather than take the punishment, he knows he can take the hits. But if he covers up his vital organs and leans up against a rope, then the rope will do the heavy lifting of all the punches. And all he has to do is just keep doing that until his opponent gets tired. So let's put this in perspective. He spent the first 7 or 8 rounds getting 7 bells punched out of him. Foreman, bigger guy, bang, 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 bang. Ali pulls in tight, goes up against the ropes, just pushes him away every now and again, but getting battered. As far as the scorekeepers were concerned, it was all Foreman. He'd won, he'd come forward, he'd done all the things that you meant to do in a proper boxing match. Ali had seemed to concede the battle from the very beginning. But what they didn't realise, that Ali's plan was going to work. And I'm going to share with you in a few moments' time exactly why it worked. He waited until he felt that Foreman had nothing left. And then when he had realised that Foreman was getting really tired, that's when the action really started. I think you're going to love watching that. Even if you're a boxing fan or you don't like boxing, look at the strategy involved. It's only a minute or so long, but you'll see how the rope-a-dope works for you in business and for boxers in the ring. And then we'll bring in Gary V to analyze how you can make a rope-a-dope happen every single day if you're just starting your own business or you're wondering how you can compete with the big boys. The big boy. No, not with the big boy, with the big boys. So I love your thoughts, love your ideas, I love your comments. Share, subscribe, and make sure you don't miss a single thing. I mean, this is fascinating stuff for me, and I hope it is for you as well. This is Speak on Stage.
Video techniques presentation worldwide. Ali working to the head of George Foreman. Ali scores again with a light left hand. That time a straight left bounces the head back of Foreman. Foreman, it seems to be 1 or 2, maybe 3 good punches. That punch taken on the glove for a round or so ago. The heat is pretty high here, around 80 degrees. Meantime, this man is devastating, to say the least. These punches are not at this particular time. Tried to pull a sneaky right hand. Right hand by Foreman was not effective. The right uppercut did bounce the head a little bit. Punches will not hurt Ali. Ali just takes his right hand. Another sneaky right hand. This time he works over the shoulder of Foreman.
So you see the strategy there, waiting until it looked like his opponent had punched himself out and then went bang bang, only a couple of hits. That's all it took, and the whole world went, oh my goodness. If it had gone down to the rounds that he'd lost, he would have lost easily on points, because he just didn't seem to get into the fight, but he chose a direct time to do it. I actually did this, I used this rope-a-dope strategy years later when I was on Blind Date, the TV show. I'm not going to explain too much about it, but I used a rope-a-dope to be able to come out of it quite effectively, and someday I'll do a show all about how to win a reality TV show, and when you see it, you'll go, oh my god, really? Is that how you did it? And I'll go, oh yes. But that's for another day. So, now we've established that being the underdog and being the small person in any particular battle doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to lose it. I mean, here we are, showing you once again Goliath versus David, little David, who was an incredible strategist, and also, by all means, if he cut the head off and went and killed Goliath's family afterwards, possibly a psychopath too. How could that work for you in business? Do not cut the heads off any of your competitors or any of your clients, or anybody that you're doing business, well, anybody. Don't cut the heads off unless you're eating fish. Cut the head off the fish. That's about it. But how can you use it in business? Gary V, who I love to bits, and this is a rare clip where he doesn't actually do anything rude. He just talks about it. Used to run a company called, he used to do a TV show on LinkedIn, on YouTube called The Wine Library. And he basically talked about wine and tasted wine and showed off about wine and all the things that people would love about wine. And wine at the time wasn't a really big thing in America because people just preferred beer. That was a national drink. But he helped to build it up, and he built up his parents' company from 4 million to 30 million by just doing this show daily. And he gathered an audience that loved this stuff, and it grew, and he would sell stuff on the back of it every single show. So what happened after that was he was able to launch his own company, VaynerMedia. And with VaynerMedia, that's the Gary Vaynerchuk that we know now, where basically he's everywhere. It makes it very easy for me when I'm looking for somebody to talk about a particular subject. I look up Gary Vaynerchuk and he's already put out a video on that subject. That's part of his strategy to be out there. So how did he start going? How did VaynerMedia manage to take on the big boys and get the attention and the business and close it and succeed to bigger strategies and successes when they were a very small entity? Have a look at this. I think you'll enjoy it. That's up next on Speak on Stage.
Yeah, I mean, the question, just to repeat it, is when you're a smaller company, how do you not get taken advantage of by bigger companies? Vayner was a very small company when I started it, and we worked with the biggest companies in the world right away with a little bit of my reputation. I have a very interesting answer to this. It's twofold. First of all, when you have your own company and you have clients, you're in control of whether you're being taken advantage of or not. If you're a client provider, if you have clients, you're more than welcome to pick up the phone and say, I don't want to work with you anymore, and here's the money back, or I don't want your money anymore. So first of all, every small business just needs to know that that's the great part of having a business. You're also in charge, right? Number two, I would argue for a lot of small businesses, the goal is to be taken advantage of. I think about the first 3 to 4 years of VaynerMedia very similar to the way Muhammad Ali fought George Foreman in Zaire. I think I rope-a-doped the industry. I think the industry thought they were taking advantage of Vayner, and they were. We were doing so much more work for the money they were paying me versus the companies that were much bigger than us when we started. I also think that's why I let it happen, because that was the value prop that we didn't have reputation. I was a wine shop owner now and social media was not what it is today. When I started Vayner in 2009, most of our clients thought that, it was a fad. So I think two things. One, you're in control, and two, it's actually probably the leverage you have. And I think too many small businesses go ideology on this. They become ideological about it, like, oh, I'm getting taken advantage of. You're a big boy, it's your bed, you can sleep in it. Like, I think you need to use it as an offense. I think it is the number one thing that a small, tiny business has over a big business that needs to make more profit, that needs to be, publicly traded and hit numbers. I think every small business should try to get taken advantage of. That's how they'll become a big business.
Right, I stand corrected. I've got to apologize. I said Rumble in the Bronx earlier. It wasn't. It was Rumble in the Jungle, if you want to look up that Ali fight, because it was in Zaire. I don't know. It was 1974. I was very small at the time, and I don't think I knew anybody was. Possibly my mum and dad, but even that is a bit sketchy. So I want to show you now, as we go into a deep dive, 7 simple ways to create a winning business. And this comes from Inc. magazine, inc.com, if you want to go and check out this particular article. I love your thoughts. I love your comments. I love your ideas. And I love the fact that we're interactive with this all the way through. If you've got a small business and you're wondering how to get your position differently in the market, this will really help. Similarly, if you're going through any particular challenges, like how to start a business, then hopefully this will let you know, just even from a motivational and inspirational point of view, that you can do a ton with it and really be able to create successes. So here's 7 things that I think are really useful to think about when you're starting your business, according to, let me just check to see who's written by. And it's written by Dr. Andrew Griffiths. It is Dr. Andrew Griffiths, there you go, digital entrepreneur and author. So let's go through what he says, because I think it's kind of useful. First of all, with your clients, whenever you're doing business with them, respect their time. They have the options of going with anybody else at any given time. So make sure that you don't overstay your welcome. Keep it short, keep it sweet, and always make sure you don't mess about. Do the things you said you're going to do and say, right, okay, we'll come back to you if that's okay. Don't hang around in there if you don't need to. This is true for sales as well, by the way. Once you've got a yes, don't hang around either and start explaining what the yes really means. Get out with the contract. Otherwise, they turn around and go, buyer's remorse. I think, oh, I'll change my mind. Let me think about it for a while. Get out there. Number 2, they're not sheep. Don't treat them like they are. They are smart. They have choices. They can do stuff with other people. And if you dingle and dangle and mess about, then they will look at other options. And if they have to do that, it's very rare they'll come back to you. Or if they do come back to you, it's a bit tainted because it was a magic relationship that didn't seem to come off the way that they wanted it to. If you want an example of this, by the way, think about if you ever go back with an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend or wife or partner, whatever it is, it's never quite the same way as it was during a magical time when it was all the way through and you stuck with it. True? Unless they bring friends, in which case it's a different game completely. Hey! Number 3 is a transaction is not enough. They want experiences. And this is true about the online world as well. They want bragging rights. They want to feel that you really care. The number one way that you lose a client is when they feel that you don't care about them. If you don't make them feel special, they will go. So all the time, it's not just transactions. It's not just getting the money and giving them stuff. It's the fact that they get it from you differently. Think about your favorite coffee shop. In the days when you used to go to a coffee shop, why would you go there? Well, because it was cheap? No, because you could make it at home. That was nice and cheap. But you go there because the waiter or waitress or the owner or the manager makes a beeline for you and says, how are you doing? Would you like your usual? We'd like to sit where you normally sit. Don't worry, I'll bring it over. And you sit down there, and it's worthwhile paying for the extra coffee. You might even stay for longer, get your laptop out, and be there on a daily basis. Why? Because you feel comfortable. Because it's not just an experience. They make you feel like it's at home. All right, then. In fact, you're doing it from home now anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Number 4, make it ridiculously easy for anybody to do business with you. Don't make them click a ton of links. Don't make them have to jump through hoops. Otherwise, they'll just go to somebody who will actually just do it easy for you. So here's the thing. When you do the survey with me to learn how to be an industry icon, it's dead simple. I'll explain to you. It's so simple. You press one button, another button, and the survey is there. Okay? Very easy. So anybody can do it. You don't have to write anything, type anything, nothing. So you can learn how well your brand is working and what you need to do to be able to step up and be more successful. Number 5 is charge for quality and make sure you deliver. Don't worry about the cost. They don't mind it. If you're doing the right stuff for them, there is a bit of a price war with the accounts department and with the procurement department, but the client may well choose a more expensive service if they know that it's going to work out really well and it's going to be amazing. You're selling the certainty of that. You're not selling a price war unless you're going for the cheapest in the market, in which case that's what you do. But you still have to promise that you're going to deliver. If you don't deliver, then it doesn't matter how cheap your product is, they just don't want it. And in many cases, the battle is, especially in the events and entertainment world, people are willing to do it for free. How do you countermand free when you're going higher? Well, the way I do it is I put my prices up. So the people who really want quality are willing to pay for it. And are not willing to take a risk on it being super cheap because it could be super rubbish at the same time. Number 6, make their lives easier. Take care of everything. I pay for cleaners, I pay for plumbers, I pay for carpenters, I pay for people to do various jobs for me. Why? Because I don't want to learn their job. I don't care. If I get a guy around to fix a sink, I don't want it, or a leak. Last week we had a leak in the kitchen. I think that's why I end up missing the show. So comes round with his mate, fixes a tank in the ceiling that's burst. Starts explaining to me what the problem is. I listen to it, I'm fascinated because I want to make sure that problem doesn't come again. They start pointing out all the bits. I'm like, no. Just tell me when you're finished, I'll pay you the money, and we're done. And if that works out, I'll pay you again the next time we've got a problem. Why? Because I don't want to know. I don't care. I just want to know that he knows and he'll come in and fix it. And if I know that anything that leaks in the house, anything that needs a handyman, he's the guy, done. Done. And you're the same. If they know you'll take care of the heavy lifting and you'll make sure it's easy for them, then people will come back to you. When I work with all my clients, that's why I get long-term relationships. I hosted the team that ran the Rugby Sevens in Dubai for 20 years. Is that because I was the best at doing it? Well, by the end of the 20 years, yes. But at the beginning, no. But what we did very simply was we made sure they had no headaches. We'd bend over backwards, we'd do whatever it took. And if they had new ideas, we'd accommodate them if they were going to work. Or we'd say they won't work, but we'd find something similar that would work. Yeah? Cool. All right, number 7, communicate smarter. Make sure that whenever you're dealing with your clients and working with your clients, you're there for them on every single level. Make it easier for them to find you. keeping in contact and chatting to them about all the things that they need to know. Communication is key. If they feel that you don't care or they feel you've gone missing, they'll just reach out to somebody else and they'll say, well, we tried to reach you, but it's gone now. And at the end of the day, the money is key. Cash flow is key. So keep them sweet, keep them happy, and you've got a better chance of getting what the results are that you want. So there you go. If you want to go to Ink, you can find that. You can read it in full detail, or you can just watch this video again later on, and I'll say the same thing. And if you put it on fast forward, I'll say it faster. And that should be worth it to the bank. Now we go to the cheat sheets, and I always find this fascinating because I get to share with you a ton of different ideas that maybe you hadn't thought about before. With this, with the cheat sheets, what I want to do is I want to go through all the different things. I spent a lot of time last night researching what would be the ways to win this battle. And that's one of the reasons I got really fascinated by the idea of David versus Goliath. How to punch above your weight and win. It means that anybody, anywhere can do anything within reason. And that's why I think this is kind of important to you. So there we've already established the fact that David and Goliath, you got this ickle little guy versus this big guy, but there's no chance that Goliath was going to beat David because strategically he was the wrong soldier for the task of taking on a guy who could shoot super accurately from a distance and win. Even if that little gap was there, he could still make it win. So here's the deal. I'm going to go through these notes. You want to apply them. I'm talking about fighting a person and fighting an organization or doesn't matter. Don't see it as that. See them as business tips. I don't expect you to go out and punch your neighbor because he's bigger than you. What I expect you to do is use it to be more strategically successful. Does that make sense to you? Thank you. All right, first one. Stop fighting fair. That sounds like a terrible idea, but who said you should fight fair? Who said you should do Queensberry rules, stand up against somebody and say, okay, you're much bigger than me, let's toss a coin, okay, you get the first punch. Why would you do that? They're going to knock you out, you're going to lose. So change the rules, change the game. One of the things that's really useful is a thing called a win-win negotiation. And this is what the United Nations use to be able to sort out countries that have a big discrepancy or a big battle against each other and they don't get on. It's a really useful thing, and Stephen Covey talks about it in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So what you have is you've got your organization and another organization, or you and somebody else. Those are some steps to it. Let me explain exactly what the steps do. What you do is you turn around first of all and you say, right, I've got a list of paper. So you've got a list of paper like this, and you do a line down the center, and you write the names on either side, and you start writing theirs first. Tell me all the things you want from this transaction. What do you want? So you want this, and you make a note. You want this? Okay, what else do you want? Want this, want this, want this, and why do you want it? Blah, blah. So you write all the things that they want first. At the end of it, you say, is there anything else that you want from this? And they'll go, no. Great, okay. Are you sure? Yeah, great. Okay, here's what I want. And then you tell everything that you want. Now, why is this important? Well, there's a couple of factors involved in this with a win-win negotiation. You might think that their problem with you or their battle with you is based on something that you perceive it's going to be. It might be that they want a completely different thing from your problem. I don't want to move you. I just need to get past you to get to that thing over there. So if you don't mind moving to one side for about an hour, I can go there and back. Do you understand the problem? It's not necessarily all about you. When you write out all the things that you want from it, they can see it and go, oh, actually, maybe we can do something different here. Now, what you're not after is a win-lose. If they win, you lose, you feel terrible. If you win and they lose, they feel terrible. But supposing that's a 1-0 score, 1-0 or 0-1. But you can build it up when you know what they're after, what you're after. You could get a much higher score out of this. You could both get 2 out of 2. And you could get, like, if the points are 1 point for you, 1 point for them, or a draw. You're allowed to have a draw, by the way. A draw or I walk away, I don't like it, it's not good enough for me, we'll come back later. That's allowed as well. But maybe you can build it up so it's worth 5 points, 20 points, more points. Let me give you an example. So you've got what they want and they've got what you want, and now you can work it out. So let's take for instance, they're selling bottles of water. Okay, so bottles of water, no, you're selling bottles of water to them. So you've got these little bottles of water and you say, right, I'd like you to buy these bottles of water. They say they're too expensive. You say, but they're worth it. They're worth $1. They say, I want to pay 50 cents. This is too much money for me per bottle of water. I can't sell that to my clients. So, okay, I'll tell you what we'll do. If you can guarantee that you will buy from me only for a whole year, I'll drop the price down because then I can mark it up with other clients and I spend less time with the wear and tear of hunting and sales and all the rest of it because I know that you want X amount of boxes every single week. So what will make it, rather than $1, make it 70 cents? And they go, okay, we can still get a profit margin on that. And you sign a deal. That way you know for the whole year you've got a client and you still make a little bit of profit on it. They know they've got a supplier that they can trust and they still make a bit of markup on it and everybody wins. That's a win-win negotiation. Does that make sense to you? Good, thank you. And another part of that, by the way, is this. Can you avoid fighting? Can you avoid fighting? This is kind of crucial as well because sometimes you don't need to fight. Sometimes you just need to get it out in the open. And also, I know it might sound like a counterproductive thing, but sometimes you could run away and live to fight another day. You don't have to fight everything you see. If you're at a massive advantage, get out of there. Come back later, regroup, work out what you need to do to be more effective. Does that make sense to you? To you, yes? Fantastic. All right, number 2 is this. Only fight if you can win. That's the same for me. I only fight a battle if I know I'm going to win it. I make sure the odds are in my favor. As you know, jump and grow wings on the way down is my own personal phrase, and then I'll go into battle. Otherwise, I just don't care. There's a number of different things that I play in, a lot of the arenas and battlegrounds that I do play in, because I know I've got a very good advantage. But I don't go, for instance, let's look at the very simple fact of our social media that we're on right now. Right now, I'm going out onto LinkedIn, going onto Facebook, I'm going onto Twitter, Periscope, and YouTube. Do I get massive numbers on all of them? No, I don't. But I'm constantly growing by broadcasting at the same time, and I'm doing a daily show, which means that I've got an advantage on social media to grow the boat gently down the stream, merrily, but just to grow the whole thing on an ongoing basis. I don't look to analyze how well I'm doing by very simple vanity metrics. How many people watched it? Oh look, those guys do much better. They do completely different videos. I'm doing an hour's worth of programming. So the battle is me versus me. And I check out and change the content all the time. So for instance, you may have been used to the last couple of days, I've been making these noises.
And, oh, yes.
I've stopped it. Why? Because I'm constantly tweaking and changing. The only noise I want to hear, apart from my voice right now, is this when I'm making money for you. And I tested it, and I'm working on it, and this is episode 69. A meal for 2. And that's a joke I'm not going to repeat if you didn't get it first time round. So tomorrow will be my 70th show, done in a little over 2 months. Most people start a podcast, most people starting any kind of media venture, do it weekly, and they wait until they're ready, maybe start it a month and a half later, and tell everybody, my podcast is coming. Who cares? It's not worth anything to me unless I know the podcast is worthwhile and good and fascinating and interesting. So don't tell me about it until I know, and you know, it's really good. True? So fight the battles you know you can win. Number 3, size up your challenge. Find out who your opponent is, or the problem, or the event, or the campaign that you're up against. Work out what they represent and make a score chart of everything that they have about them that's more of an advantage than you actually have. Because there will be something that's different. If you've ever played trump cards, and I mean not Donald Trump cards, but trump cards, where you got the cards and we've got scores on. Say you're playing, like, I bought one for my daughter, Frozen, which is, the movie. So you've got all these different, you've got Elsa and Anna, and you've got Olaf, you've got all these different characters. And each of them have different scores for how smart they are, special powers they have, and you know, how fast or whatever it is. And you choose the score where you think you can beat the other character, even in the dark where you don't know what their character is. Sometimes you show, sometimes you don't. That's the key. Work out with your enemy or your competition or the problem you're up against what the actual scores are that you're going up against. And that means that somewhere is an angle, round the back, it might be a crack in the armor or something where you can start to make a huge advantage and start doing things that are different from everybody else. When you can work that out, suddenly the battle becomes a lot more favorable in your favor. Number 4, work out the terrain, work out the battleground, work out the escape plan. It doesn't mean that you have to fight them exactly where you're told to fight them. It could be a different war that you're fighting. Sometimes a war is not about actually fighting head to head. It's a war of attrition. It's a war of gathering supplies. It's a political war where you're going and connecting with everybody, making great friends with everybody so they support you. So by the time the champion comes back in, everybody's against them, and we've got no idea how it happened. But you knocked on doors and you made connections and you made alliances with every single person during that time. So there's lots of different ways of changing the terrain, changing the battleground so it suits you. Ideally, you want to be on higher ground looking down. It's called a kill box, where you're looking down at where they are, and so you pick them off from different angles. But that's not necessarily true for business, but it is when you think about the changes you could make. Is this useful for you, by the way? Is it financially good for you? Is it possibly a way of thinking about doing stuff differently? I hope so. Let me know. Put down what you think of today's show, because it's a slightly different style, a bit less funny, a bit more driven, and a bit more giving you the business tips that you're after. So I'd like to know if you prefer it like this, or you just want me to sit there and make noises and go with a stress toy and go Arr! And do stuff like that instead. Just testing out the water, because you should do. You're always a work in progress. Okay, number 5 is work out your lowest hanging fruit in the garden, the thing that you can pick off and make advantage. So that was in the case of David and Goliath. He knew that he could take a shot from a certain distance and hit the point he's after 99% of the time. So therefore, if he stayed out of the distance of Goliath, he had 5 stones. He got 5 chances to hit that guy exactly in the forehead where the mask wasn't covering his face. And he did it. So work out from that what your particular advantages are. Work out from that what the lowest hanging fruit is that you need to take. It might be that you cut off people's supplies. It might be that you go and you make advantage by creating a relationship with the people that look after them. It might be that you just say, okay, they've got this covered. There's no way I'm going to beat this. But what I can do is I can look at areas that they haven't gone to yet, set myself up with there. And so by the time they arrive, they have to then move me out the way. So then we've got to be open to some kind of a strategic alliance, because while they're doing all that stuff over there, I've embedded myself here. Does that make sense? I hope it does. All right, next up is number 6, which is this. Number 6, change the battlefield. As I mentioned earlier, head to higher ground. Make sure you've got the best view possible, because if you don't do that, you end up in a situation where you're going head to head with possibly somebody who's taller than you. If you can, this is typically in battle, whoever starts at the highest part of a hill can see the enemy coming. They can bed in. They can throw down while the enemy's trying to throw up. They'll be a lot more accurate, and they can choose when to go down. If the enemy's running up at you and you're there, you don't need to move. You just need to steady yourself and wait for them to come to you. So there's lots of advantages from battle which are really useful for business as well. And that's why so many people see business as battle. Possibly not in the future. I think in many cases for young people that are coming through, Generation Alpha, and if you missed the show yesterday, you should watch it, all about our 10-year-olds and the world they're in. They're all about collaboration. They're all about less borders. They're all about using technology to bring everybody closer, and that's got to be a great thing. Don't you think? I think so. All right, so number 7, tip the odds in your favor and strategize your long and short-term timetable. So once you've started looking at all these different things that make it better and easier for you, work out when you're going to go to battle. Are you going to do it now, straight away? Going to get in before anybody knows? The surprise and the advantage of surprise should not be ignored. While they're going, we're okay, we're okay. How many times have you heard stories about while the enemies were sleeping, the guys snuck into the camp and took them out in their beds? I'm not saying that's a particularly noble way of doing it, but if you win, the winner is the person that wins. End of story. So with that, it's worth thinking about where you would position yourself and whether you want to take it on now or take it on later, and maybe you've got different opportunities that you haven't thought about. Number 8, what's your enemy's weaknesses? Weigh them up and every angle. We kind of touched on this earlier, but we're not just looking about what they do. We're really looking about what their particular weakness is. What is it that you can do better than them? It might be drinking them under the table. It might be karaoke. It might be just putting out social media and creating an audience. But there's something in it that works really well. Typically, if you're going to get a reputation and you're a small entity, if you can find the time, social media is perfect for you. Get stuff out, be inventive, interview people, create a podcast, create media, create your own TV show like this, do a vlog or do a blog. Because what happens is your ability to reach people and entertain them and engage them is much, much better in many ways than the much bigger campaign that's organized through an agency. So the company you're up against might be able to say, we can get more domination by spending more money on advertising, but they're moving a dinosaur. How many times have you watched a video on YouTube that looks like a corporate video? as opposed to looking like a person who's a normal person making a quality video that they're going to teach you a ton of stuff, but you know it's a real person. It's working in advertising the same way. Think about this. People now prefer to have an advert that looks like it's got real people in it and not beautiful models. They don't believe it if it's got beautiful models because quite clearly it's fake and it's staged. They want to see real people can be identified as a real family or a real guy in this business driving that car and talking about how it affected them. So there's different battlegrounds that you can play in that are really fascinating too. Number 9, I mentioned this before, use speed as a weapon. If you go early, will you get the advantage of momentum? If they're not sure exactly what you're doing and you get some punches in before they even start, can you take them down before we've even started? Some cases it's yes, some cases it's no, but it's always worth thinking about. What I do in business is I'm a very early adopter. As soon as I see a challenge, I go, right, I'm going to take that on. The reason I'm so good at doing these TV shows as opposed to most of the shows that you see being done, this is live by the way, across all the different platforms, is when we went into lockdown and I realized that as a speaker, I'm not going to get any gigs for a while. People are going to be in quarantine. They're going to be worried about putting an audience into a room in case they catch coronavirus. I learned to go online. I learned to do social, digital stagecraft. I learned how to drive a desk and use my laptop to produce something like this, which is not Zoom. I can do this on Zoom. I can go live with a show like this to Zoom to an audience around the world. That's the advantage of setting out early and becoming an early adopter. It really works. All right. Number 10, how can you cheat? Now, this is going to be something that people say, oh, that's controversial. No, it's not controversial. It's smart business. You know what your problem is with that idea about you shouldn't cheat, Dave? Here's what the problem is. When you're at school, they taught us a load of rubbish lessons. Some good stuff as well, but remember when we said to you that when you're doing a test, you mustn't look at anybody else's answers. It's all about you. It's called cheating. Well, how do you think business works now? You got partnerships, you collaborate, you move together strategically. That's not cheating, that's getting together with somebody and making a strategic alliance. Cheating, oh yes, you shouldn't look at somebody else's answers. How do you think that China's been able to create so much incredible tech? They look at what's working in the market with the likes of Apple and Samsung and so on, and Huawei turns around and says, right, we like what they're doing. Can we add something else to make it cheaper and more effective? And everybody does that to each other now. That's a standard business model, but at school you were taught it was morally a wrong way to do it. There's loads of things we got taught at school, like cheating, that really don't set you up properly for a proper way of doing it. Even now, I mean, the retention, I spent most of my time at school learning facts, learning figures, learning algorithms. Now, I can just go online, press on Google, and get all the answers. In fact, I can even ask my watch, and my watch will tell me most of the things I need to know. I didn't need to learn all that stuff. So it's out of date then, it's even more out of date now. The only thing that matters in the end is winning, but living with yourself afterwards. If you can feel good and win, happy days. All right, so slowing the enemy down and finding their weak spots, their soft spots, all the rest of it. If I was talking about proper battle between two people, I'm talking about the weak spots. When somebody comes over to you, this is the equivalent of kicking them in the... You still know what I mean? Kicking them in the... No idea? Google it. All right, number 11. Can you find and use a weapon? Or can you recruit help? Why should that be important? Well, look, if you're up against a big guy, pick up a broom. Pick up a shoe. Well, not maybe a shoe unless you've got like really, really big cowboy boots. But find something. Johnny Depp's one of the greatest stories for Johnny Depp. And I'm a big fan of Johnny Depp. I don't love all his movies because some of them are a bit rubbish. But he's still a very interesting character. When he was a kid, and you might wonder, why is it, apart from the Captain Jack franchise with Pirates of the Caribbean, he always did indie movies that were a little bit quirky, a little bit weird, when it's quite clear he could have been a Tom Cruise character. He could have gone out there. In fact, there's only one movie, I think, Nick of Time or something like that, where he actually plays a die-hard, gunny fighting hero. Rest of the time, he plays these really quirky, weird sort of characters. Now, why should it be like that with Johnny Depp? Well, when he was a kid, he was bullied at school, and his mum said to him, Don't wait to get bullied again. Here's what I want you to do. Find the biggest stone you can do when that bully comes up to you, is much bigger than you, and hit him as hard as you can with your fist with a rock in it. So the next day, the bully comes up, Johnny Depp, bang! And the bully never came at him again, and nobody ever did. And if you think about his business model, he's only ever done those kind of quirky movies. He's never been dragged into the Hollywood, you must do this, you must do that, otherwise you're not us. And if you compare him to somebody who's a very good actor as well, someone like Brendan Fraser, who starred in The Mummy, and lots of really good movies like that. He's back on TV again, but he stopped doing it. Why? He stopped for about 10 years or so because he got so many injuries doing these action hero movies. He really hurt himself physically and emotionally. And then Hollywood turned around and said, right, I don't want to work with you anymore. And he said, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. If you see him now, and he's still a great actor, and I still love him, he's still really funny, he's in Doom Patrol wearing a mask. You wouldn't even know it's him apart from recognizing his voice. And he's put some weight on. Quite a lot of weight. But good for him. So think about it. Think about the battle that you're going to do. Think about using a weapon, and think about the weapon and the advantage it will give you. At the end of the day, winning and being happy that you won, morally doing the right thing for yourself and the family and the people you love, especially during a coronavirus lockdown, a pandemic, is a battleground that you really want to turn around to and say, you know what, I can sleep easy. Recruiting help is very important as well. Who do you know who's interested in the end results? Who can help you? Sometimes they give you resources, sometimes they give you staff, but if you don't ask, you don't know. But there's a ton of people out there who really could do with somebody like you to go out and do all the heavy lifting for them. Think about sponsorship. You're doing a show, or you're doing a podcast, you're doing a magazine, you're doing social media, you reach a certain audience. You've got a big organization that might well sponsor you. Why would they ever consider sponsoring you? Well, the reason they'd consider sponsoring you is very simple. If you can turn around and do something that they would take a lot of time to be able to do on their own. So if they, for instance, were to create, imagine a company, say a petrol, oil, gas company. You're working in the car space. You've got your own little organization. You produce a TV show all about the car industry. You get them to sponsor it for you because now, for very little apart from just signing off a marketing budget, they've got their own TV show all about the automotive industry with a presenter, with real facts, with an audience that they can just promote and say, that's our show. If they were to create it and go to an agency and create it from scratch, it would cost them a small fortune because the agency would make sure it costs a small fortune. And if at some point of time they don't like what you're doing, they just get rid of it. They just don't spend any more money on it. But if they do like it, they invest in it. And while they're doing that with you, that means that you start becoming a heavy hitter. It's a simple battle plan. It's on the roadmap I use for all my industry icon clients, by the way, just in case. All right, number 6, can you tire them out using a rope-a-dope method like Muhammad Ali? I won't spend too long on this because I've already explained it at length, but can you tire them out? Can you use their size against them? When I was a kid, I used to do judo, and judo is the Japanese art of being able to throw opponents. And often I was up against a much bigger opponent, but by using leverage and ducking down, you get an ippon and you can throw them down on the ground, then hold them down, and you can win. Often there's an optimum size, and being a big bruiser makes it a lot more difficult because then you've got to be super fast and super agile to take on somebody who's smaller than you, but can get into those nicks and crannies and really make a big difference. So therefore your size could be an advantage. Number 13, train for the task. The simple way of doing it. Karate Kid, wax on, wax off, and all that stuff. Who can you get to even the odds? Can you get a mentor to fast track you to be where you need to be in your industry? Go up against your clients, work out what you need to do. That's what I do from experience, mentoring and coaching people. So who could you get to help you in your own industry? You've got a new company, you know you've got to be over there, you need money, you need help, you need advice. There's incubators all around the world. There's organizations that sponsor. There's people who have retired who may want to earn a little bit extra but can tell you how they took their company to becoming a Fortune 500 company even though nobody asks them anymore because they're retired. There's loads of ways you can get yourself up to speed, not least the fact that if you start working on the training, you start learning new skills, then you become a much more effective operator straight away from the get-go. I never say get-go before, but you know what it means. Ultimately, get-go is going to mean money. Right, number 14. Can you leverage the entire game? Can you change the game? Now, I'm going to say something that you're going to say is terrible now. Can you bribe the referee? Can you stack the decision makers with enough stuff that makes them go, you know what, it's not worth the problem, you can get it, I'll give it to you straight away. Now that's cheating, that's terrible. Not if you win, it's not. I know I'm showing you a level of moral fiber. I personally don't do this. I personally will not do anything that's immoral that I couldn't sleep and live with. But what I do think is when you start going into business, the gloves are off. Think about it. There's 7.5 billion people now interconnected through the internet. Location makes very little difference because you're now watching this show from anywhere. I mean, where are you around the world? Germany, Holland, Africa, America, Britain, UAE, Egypt, New Zealand, Australia, just some of the countries where people say, hi, Dave. India, Pakistan, different parts of Oman. I get people from all around the world who are turning around and saying hi. So therefore, I'm reaching all these different people. So therefore, does it really matter if I change the game? My competition's gone through the roof, but also my reach has increased. So do whatever makes it win for you. Only win the battles you know you can win. Don't fight anything you know is going to be really difficult. All right, number 15 is this one. I think we got to 16 with this particular presentation. So I'm going to share that with you in a moment. So work out with this, what actually constitutes a win? Do you need to beat them outright? Score out of 10. You've got to get 10 out of 10 to get a win. What if you show up and you're up against these guys and you inspire everybody by being beaten to step up and join the revolution? So while you're there wounded, suddenly you're not fighting the full battle because everybody else has jumped in on your behalf and made it work. You see this happen in a ton of movies. And it's not a stupid way to fight, it's a smart way. Can you walk away having made the damage that you want to do so your point is proven? So people then will say, you know what, don't mess with that person. This is a typical way that people say take on a bully. You can't fight the bully physically because they're bigger and stronger than you are. But if you stand up and punch them as hard as you can and they feel it, they will stop attacking you. Why? It's too much hard work. You're a nutter. You are the last person ever going to go and fight. We'll probably make friends with you and either give you a wide berth or say, hi, how are you doing? I did that when I was a kid. I made sure that anybody who's coming after me, we either made friends or I wouldn't put up with their crap. And now I don't do that with anybody, don't care who they are. Think about it. Otherwise, you spend the rest of your life thinking that you owe people something and they don't deserve it. So don't be scared to step up. Do what you need to do. What actually means a win? And last but not least, this is point number 16. I never normally go to 16, but this was kind of important. How can you prevent the repercussions? How can you make sure that this doesn't happen again? When you're in a situation where you're up against somebody really tough and you really had to dig deep and it's been a lot of resources, a lot of challenges, what can you put in place? Can you put a roadmap together? Can you write out terms of engagement so the next time something happens to you, they agree to back you? And if it happens to them, you agree to back them so you've got safety in numbers? There are a number of ways that you can learn, and sometimes the biggest battle you got is to realize what you should do, what you shouldn't do, and the lessons you learned from it. Like, for instance, if you don't get a sale, you'll learn the next thing to do is just say next and move on to get another client. And sometimes when you get your fingers burned, you learn that you don't want to get your fingers burned anytime like that ever again. So I hope this has been useful for you. Slightly different show today. Really important, I think, because it's been how I judge my career. And when you watch the things I do in the future, you'll know that this is a battle that I'm playing. This is the game that I'm playing to get to where I need to be. Life is a game. Business is a game. And it doesn't have to be brutal. It doesn't have to be horrible. It can be fun. So if you want to take a screenshot of this, then be my guest. I'll give you a countdown for that. 3, 2, 1. And now, it's gone.